This is a D6 generation pip. Bite-sized content for a busy gamer. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ.
Hey, what about me?
Oh yeah, and sometimes featuring Raef, Hollywood, Granger.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day, good evening. You're listening to Raef, Hollywood, Granger, and another D6G pip. All right, we're going to do a Hollywood Minute, which those of you who've been listening for years knows goes on for way more than just 1 minute. But we're going to keep to that title. Okay, I'd like to share with you my recent experience being the Dungeon Master for the Wrath and Glory game system. And I want to say it is a fantastic game system, and I didn't want to like it. It is produced by Cubicle 7, I do believe, and what happened was it's fall in New England right now as I record this, and somehow fall in the breezy weather triggers my Dungeons and Dragons itch that I like to scratch. And I believe that's because I have very fond memories. I used to go up to a cabin in Canada, and we would go with another family, my family's friends, and we would go up there, and me and their son, David, we would just play Dungeons and Dragons. Now, when I say Dungeons and Dragons, we didn't really ever play because it was just two people. We just didn't know how to do that. But what we would do is world build or make characters. And so I have these very fond memories of the wind blowing, being in this cabin, hearing the water lap against the stones, and just building characters, hour after hour after hour. Now, you guys have to remember, when I was a young boy, there was no anything. There was, certainly where we were, there was electricity for lights and a radio, but there certainly wasn't any computers, laptops, iPads, nothing. So after you were done fishing and running around and playing catching snakes, which I used to do all the time, you had nothing to do, so you did this. You read or you did created characters. And so what happens is once fall comes to New England and the wind starts to blow, I have these great desires to be inside with the windows open and have the wind blowing around. So I don't know, it's weird. What's really interesting too is my youngest daughter shares that. She just loves it as well. So I guess we're made of the same cloth. Although she doesn't do character building and world building, she loves the wind as well. So I was like, oh, and of course it's my birthday month in September. And so what typically happens with our game group is we have what we call games days, and I typically would have role-playing games days. I have this very fond memory of running a Dark Heresy campaign. This is with Dark Heresy number 1, version 1, the Fantasy Flight Games version, way back when. I ran this great campaign, and it was very narrative, and just had a blast. And I was really prepared as a dungeon master back then, and it came out really well. And so I was like, oh, I want to revisit that. So I went down the Dark Heresy rabbit hole. And the reason why I like Dark Heresy, by the way, is I love playing the weedy, 0 to 1 level character, the character that's not a Space Marine. As a matter of fact, I'm terrible at running Space Marine campaigns because for a different birthday, I did do a Space Marine campaign, and it's like a big giant joke to this day. And for some bizarre reason, I was like, well, no, I've got to give them some sort of limitations. And so this world that they were on was like really deadly and could pierce Space Marine armor and all this stuff that I created. And I got a little lost in the skill tests, and I think there was like a rocky terrain feature, and I think it was Dave's Space Marine just kept failing the skill tests, and so couldn't make it up the rocky terrain. And they were kind to just do the adventure, but then at the end, Dave shared with me, he's like, I asked for feedback. He's like, yeah, that wasn't fun at all. He's like, the fun at being, and I didn't take that as criticism. I appreciated it. he wasn't being trying to be hurtful or anything. It was like, he's like, hey, we're supposed to be superheroes. We're supposed to be superhuman. We're supposed to be super strong and just mow down mobs of enemies. And I was like, oh, of course you are. I totally bungled it, but it was hilarious. I tried to make basically, Imperial servants out of Space Marines and just totally bungled it. So, but it was a good learning curve for me, especially regarding the skill tests too. Because that comes into play later. And so I went down this dark heresy, a dark rabbit hole, not dark hole, but rabbit hole, and just got my book out. And one thing I learned was, I guess the version 2 versions of the books, which I own a bunch of them, are worth quite a bit of money on the open market. I guess they're worth about $250. And I was like, wow, I'm keeping my books. I'm not looking to sell them because I just love them for the lore and the memories. But I also was hesitant as I was doing my research. I was like, why don't they just make a D20 version? I can't get into the D100 system for multiple reasons. Here's reason number one. I warn you right now, this is a deep Raef style rabbit hole on the Dark Heresy / 40K role-playing universe. And so, maybe pause right now and go listen to Russ or Craig or another podcast, because it could really be boring. But it's interesting to me. So the D100, for some reason, I don't get excited about rolling 2 dice when my weapon skill's 46. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm so ingrained into me of rolling a D20 and that excitement of rolling a 16 and adding my bonus. I got an 18 and I hit. Woo! And I know what it means when my armor class is 18 and I'm all strong and plate armor with a shield +2. Woo, I'm armor class 20. I don't know. It's just like there's something exciting about rolling a 20. It reminds me of being at the craps table. I love playing the game of craps at casinos. So maybe I'll do a podcast on that. I love teaching people how to play craps because so many people teach craps. Little rant here. So many people teach people craps by like teaching them the statistics and the odds. That has nothing to do with how you play the game or understanding what the board is. If you walk up to a craps table and you see it and you see people playing it, it could be quite confusing. And it's actually a very simple game. But enough on that. We'll do that another time. Okay, so I just don't get excited about rolling 2 dice and then go, woohoo, I hit. And then, the D100 system is wonky when you start to add in all the different percentages to your skills that your skills give you, then your weapon gives you. It ends up being very, very crunchy rule set and almost becomes a tactical kind of miniature game, but using role-playing figures, which some people really like, and I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying that, like, the narrative in the D100, I was, like, searching for a Dark Heresy campaign that used a D20 system, which just, I couldn't find one. And I thought about doing, like, Savage Worlds, and I've tried that before, too, but that doesn't scratch the same kind of itch either. So I did come across Wrath and Glory and how they kind of picked up the banner of the 40K universe and had written these role-playing games. But then I saw it was D6s, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I was thinking maybe, and it had a sort of narrative component where you roll one die tells the narrative story, and I had tried that with the different systems. And what's that system that Fantasy Flight game put out there too, again, where you would roll all these dice? It was like a 12-sided and a 6-sided and 8-sided, but it had all sorts of icons on it, and there was like some kind of narrative thing to it. So I was like, I never know how to do that. So I kind of skipped over that really quickly, and then I just kept trying to find a D20 based system or a conversion or something. So finally, I kind of just can't find it, and I'm like, well, maybe I can just play my Dark Heresy version 2 from Fantasy Flight Games and just make it be, rules light and make it more narrative and not get bogged down to the D100. And it won't be as exciting as rolling a D20, but whatever. And so I was conversing with Dave about it, and he was like, Andy ran, old Andy Fame ran a session, one convention out there somewhere. It might even be an Adepticon, but he ran the Wrath and Glory system. So I called up Andy, and he said he really liked it. And so he was nice enough to share with me some of his PDFs. And so I started to read it. And sure enough, I started to like and see what they were doing with the D6 method of rolling. Now, I'm no rules expert, right? If Russ were on here and played Wrath and Glory, he could break down the exact mechanics. So if you're wondering, like, what is the D6 mechanic Raef's talking about? But basically what you do is you create this pool of dice. So let's say that your strength is a 3 because you base it on a D6, and and then you have a skill of weapon combat. I'm totally making this up. So you roll 3 dice for your strength, and then you pick a dice because of your weapon skill. You have 4 dice, and then there's a test. In the GM creates a test level. Let's say the success level is 2. You just have to roll 4, 5, or 6. That counts as a success. And you've got your pool of 4 dice. So the object is to kind of get bigger pools of dice to make it easier to succeed as you get better. And you roll that, and however many successes you get, you can hit with your sword, so to speak. And it was easy to construct the dice pools when playing. It was understandable, and since I like rolling D6s when playing the miniature game, felt like that. It was fun. There's a boosting mechanic in there. There's a way to like take your 6s and they can count as double successes, which is exciting. So that gives you that D20 feel of when you roll a D20. There's things you can do with your 6s to create basically like an inspiration points. There's inspiration points, so I like that too because it allows the hero to swing the narrative and become the hero of the story. It had a lot of features that I really liked, and there's that complication dice too. So that one dice, they call it the Wrath die. If you get a 6, awesome stuff happens, and if you get a 1, a complication happens. But what I liked is this particular book goes into explaining complications don't always have to be that you don't succeed. So they give an example, like if you're a pilot and you're trying to pilot this land speeder and you roll a complication, it's not that the car doesn't start up, but it might start up, make a loud bang, and then attract the attention of the local Arbites or something like that. So it's like I think the rule book calls it a success. Especially if you succeed on your dice pool but roll the complication, they call it like a success with a yes, but. You succeed, but this happens. So it's really kind of neat. Very narrative. Talks about how the game is narrative. You can boil it down to make it crunchy. The rules are there for that, like meaning grid-based combat, but also allows the theater of the mind type of combat, setting the scene and so on and so forth. So as I started to read this rule set, I said to myself, ooh, this is exciting. I want to do this. And so I got the very first adventure, which is called Graveyard Shift. You start out as 0 level or 1 level character. They do tiers. It's tier 1. So I like that too. You buy one rule book and you can play, a inquisitorial acolyte level character all the way up to tier 4, which would be a super high level, space marine or tech marine, or they do have an orc character in there, and they do have an Eldar character in there. We did just all humans. And so the one main rulebook, Wrath and Glory, enables you to play tiers 1 through 4, and it just I guess you just do that through the difficulty of the tests. But we did tier 1, which is what I wanted to do, and had super fun. So the players were Dave, Ian, Andy, and Stino. I wanted to have a small group, and I also reached out to Russ for the local people here, and I said, ooh, it'd be fun to do Joe, John, Craig, and Russ. And of course, Seppi's not local here, so just keep it local. And I just did a one-off. We just did, I think, like a 6-hour day, and it was really fun. So I kind of wanted to go through that a little bit of how I prepped and what I wanted to do. So first thing I did was, again, I kind of wanted to keep to the narrative style. So the first thing I did, so this is kind of how to prep as a game master, part 4. Russ and I like to talk about this stuff. I read the module. And then I read it a second time, and then I read it a third time. Now, the module is only like 12 pages, like 6 pages front and back with a lot of pictures and stuff. But even just reading it over a 2-week period, like about 4 separate times, just reading it, it was super helpful. It really allowed me to infuse who the main character was, all the main characters. So then what I did was I went through and hit a highlighter, stuff that I just wanted to remember as the game master. And I really wanted to breathe life into these NPCs. So I stole a page from Russ's rule book, and I'm sure other good DMs out there, where on my drives to work or going between places, I would ruminate, who is Inquisitor Mendax? I'm not going to do, there might be spoilers. So I'm going to talk about graveyard shifts. If you think you want to run it or be part of it, maybe you want to pause this and then come back to it. I'll try to do it without spoilers, but I'm not going to make any promises. I would think, who is Inquisitor Mendax more than just her physical description? What is she like? How if the characters try to strong arm her, how is she going to react? If the characters try to sweet talk her, how is she going to react? Is she more truthful? Does she more lie? Does she more manipulate? Does she more try to charm? And they give you nuggets of that in there, but I fleshed her out in my mind to try to make her, what would she do in different situations? And then I even got an index card, and I just kind of made up her different traits, which 9/10 of it were right in the, when I say personality traits, right in the book. But then I gave her a quirk that wasn't in the book. I forget what her quirk was. It might have been like quick to anger, seems very grandmotherly, but then quick to anger, something like that. And that, again, I didn't even have to use that when we played. It never came up, but it made her more 3-dimensional. Because I find that's my weakest link when playing, is I don't exactly know how to act out the different NPCs. I can do voices really well, but I don't exactly know how to get them to react in a way that would be real. So that was really fun. And then there was like 3 or 4 other sub-main characters, and I did the same thing. I'd go back through, I'd highlight what their traits were, then I transposed them over to an index card, wrote down what their traits were, and gave them a quirk. And that, to me, just breathed a lot more life into the system. The other goal for myself was to keep the adventure simple. I always have this tendency to read what the characters are supposed to do and the little puzzle or the little clue that they're supposed to get. I read that and I go, oh my gosh, that's so easy. I then have a tendency to make it more difficult, and then the characters are scratching their head. So I said, do not make it more difficult. If it's simply like they have to go up to the librarian and they just have to ask her the question they want to ask her, again, try and talk without spoilers, and then she gives the answer. Just leave it like that. Don't make it a difficult test. Don't make them have to jump through hoops. And sure enough, it just was fun, because they kind of went to point A and to point B and to point C. And the very first adventure is pretty much on rails. It really tells the characters where to go. But being on the other side of that as a character, it's fun to advance through the story, right? You don't want to hit every decision point and be totally confused. So I thought that was really fun. Ooh, the other thing that the rule book recommends, this was brilliant. Before you start playing, it recommends, and actually is a rule, that you create what's called a framework. And so we did session 0 where we built characters even before we played, and I had them come up with their framework, including advising them that they're gonna want a character, each one, to sort of have a specialty in some kind of skill sets, and I laid out what that would be. They'd want to have a face or a character that's really good interacting with people. They're going to want to have a person that can interact with tech. They're going to want to have a person that can be stealthy. They can have a person that is combat heavy, and a couple other stereotypical or archetypal role-playing character skill sets. And I loved that was part of the framework, to let them know what they would need to be prepared for. I also, when I run a campaign, I don't want the more wizardy type of character. So let's say that somebody wants to be a scribe, as a Dark Heresy scribe, but it's like, well, then if there is a combat mission, that they can't do anything. And this game does a great job that everybody can participate, succeed, and not crumple like a paper doll in combat. Now, if you built an Imperial Guard character, yeah, you are going to have more combat-based abilities. And so the person who wants to be more combat skill-focused can be, which I thought was neat, that they but the scribe can also be the scribe and have the let's say historical or more scholarly tests that need to be passed and succeed, but also not crumple at the first sign of some kind of combat. So the framework also gets the characters to agree what their mission is. Like it might be, my goal is to serve the God Emperor, or my goal is to be true to my profession as a sister initiate, or, whatever it is, they all agree. And what I loved about that is it takes away the classic problem of you have the rogue, right? And he's just say, neutral or even neutral evil, tendons towards, evil. He's not going to have a problem beating up a guard or threatening him with his life to get information. And then you have the paladin who says, I can't let that happen. Or the holy cleric, I can't let that happen among the party. And the party's trying to role play, but then you have the party at odds. I don't know. Some dungeon masters may love that. I hate it, probably because I'm not good at managing it. So I like it when everybody's on a mission. Hey, you all can be evil-based characters. Don't care, because then at least everybody's on a mission, the same goal. The party's not divisive. So again, I don't like it that way, but I thought it was neat that the game rules said, hey, get the characters to all agree what's the mission. So that way, when they're on the mission and there's options to do it, there's not necessarily party split. They can come back to this framework and go, well, we kind of agreed. Like in this case, they were like, we're going to do what the Inquisitor sets us out to do. Now, how they go about it is their own way. But so it makes it that way. They're not like, well, I'm just going to fly off planet and go over here. So it made it, that was a brilliant thing. So I really like Wrath and Glory did that. Where was I? Talking about how they built their different characters and how I did the prepping for the NPCs. The other thing I found interesting is, and I did have some help. I told Dave, and he had played before, so I knew I'd have help with him, and I had tasked Dave for learning the range rules, because a lot of times in these games, like I got the basic combat rules under my hand, so to speak, and used the handouts for the quick rules and stuff. But then when you add the shooting rules, there's all sorts of new mechanics that the weapons themselves bring into play. Like, it's much easier to learn combat of sword versus person, right? That's pretty easy. You hit, there's usually a toughness roll, an armor roll, you have wounds, and you're done. But when you add a weapon, well, now that weapon can burst shot, single shot. What about shooting into melee? What about ranges? Just having multiple firing ranges, weapons that can fire increases the rule set. So I had Dave tasked with that. So I didn't have to worry about knowing the whole rules 100%. But I made a commitment that I wanted to play by the rules. I wasn't going to do a Raef thing and just go, that rule doesn't make sense to me or seems too difficult, I'm going to suspend it. And boy, did that turn out really well. There were a couple times when the players were like, wait a minute, this thing seems impossible. It was like a combat, I think. And, how are we going to accomplish this? And then they rolled kind of terribly, and it looked like it was going to go bad, like a character was going to die. But then I just stuck to it. I'm like, well, the rules are pretty clear and we did it right. So let's just see what happens. And sure enough, what they began to do was look at the rules, and one of the characters had a way to kind of do a lookout, sir, and absorb the hit. And they could use some of the, quote, inspiration, the wrath, the glory points that they had collected, and they could use those to shift some of the dice around and create different results. And so the rules actually took care of a scenario where the character was going to instant die. And actually, he wouldn't even technically instant dead. He would have been brought down to 0 wounds, which I like here. You don't fall unconscious. When you're brought down to 0 wounds, I believe you can crawl, which means you can still fight and attack. You can withdraw, but you're basically like still 100% combat ready, and you're just kind of leaning on a stack of crates or a stack of boxes or something like that, So the dying rules in this rule game were really cool too. So I was really happy with the way the rule set worked, and we did have a very narrative campaign. I would consider it a success. We went all the way through. People had a good time. It was a one-off, so we don't have to worry about trying to get together again. Although I would like to examine the second second adventure. Also, I found the rules engaging. The rule book is beautiful. I have the PDF and the hardbound book. They do a great job of that. The character creation, it was simple as well, but not. I don't mean simple in a it was easy to do, but the characters were complex and had enough fluff to really get into the role play. I think the game encouraged role play elements, and by everybody having a sort of specialty, another preference. I like it when everybody gets a chance to shine and be able to do their special thing. And what the game does is automatically rewards it, rather than if somebody's got a really high insight skill and everybody's like, well, I'll roll insight. I mean, maybe I'll get a 20 and I'll figure it out. And so they roll a 20 and they can sort of beat out on the skill roll the person who has the super great, invested all their points and have their character in the skill roll. I like this game where, the person who's not trained in being a pilot still has a chance of getting the vehicle to operate, but the person with the pilot skill is going to most likely succeed. So I thought that's really cool. And there's a cool way to add when you can help an ally too by giving them basically add to their dice pool. So I really liked how the rules reinforce my preferred way of playing, which is to have characters have like kind of their special, unique thing. So, so without giving any spoilers, I kind of wanted to say what happened at the end. But, we'll put it this way. The heroes were successful. A lot of plot hooks to do a second adventure. If you are in the Warhammer role-playing frame of mind, I definitely recommend you check out Cubicle 7, check out Wrath and Glory. They have tons of supplements, tons of extra things going on. They also, they do have a new starter kit coming out. I think COVID backed them up a little bit. Dave and I had reached out to the publishers to see, I thought about running a campaign out at this thing that Ian invited me to, and I thought, maybe we'll kill two birds with one stone. We can help support Cubicle 7, but I think COVID said they set them back, and so this new starter kit thing wasn't available. So I just went ahead and purchased what I wanted to purchase of the current rule set, but it wasn't the new fancy bundle. And but check them out. I think they get a new kind of starter kit thing coming out somewhat soon. And they also have a complete fantasy side too, the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, which is really interesting because I played that 100 years ago back in college. That was really fun too. I really liked that system back then. And they do have other role-playing products too. I think I saw Doctor Who on there, which I don't really know anything about, but they do have other stuff. So I highly recommend it. If you're in the 40K frame of mind, drag out your old fantasy Flight Games books, read it for the nostalgia of it, or heck, play the D100 system. It's still a valid system. People are playing it all over the place. I'm just not that good at it. I definitely like this D6 dice pool type of thing. So, hey, thanks for listening. I've got some other ideas for some other pips. Stay tuned to those. I guess we'll just add to that doing the craps one. But I also got a Steam Deck. I don't know if any of you out there have kept your eye on that, but I ordered that about 4 or 5 months ago, and I thought I would give my impressions of a Steam Deck. It's another one of my ideas. And so, hey, until next time, thanks for listening and happy gaming.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.